In this demonstration, I will show how the dynamic masking can be applied, and then this can be published in the catalog which is available to the data consumers. So let's take a scenario where we go in as a data engineer. Let's take So the one of the fundamental mechanisms that in the proposed solutions is that any data consumer uh, consumes the data asset through the catalog. Now the catalog is a mechanism by which we are able to share the data assets as well as the various connection informations, notebooks, and other data related artifacts. So let's take a look at the catalog. So catalog is basically are of different types. So there is a platform catalog. Platform catalog primarily has no data enforcement policies. So everyone has access to these catalogs. Whoever is using the platform will have access to this catalog. There may not be any data enforcement policies that are applied. So we can see that through the settings here. So there's no data enforcement policies being applied. And then there are various access control mechanisms who can access these based on based on the permissions. But essentially, we can have these catalogs where which are meant for the platform users as well as for data stewards to actually see and build and configure. So they get to see all the details. But for general users, where we need to have a governed catalog, we can enforce the various data protection policies. So for example, there is a health catalog here. Here what we do is we apply a policy which are which are mandated by the organization. So here we have enforced data protection policies on the health catalog. So let us take a scenario where how do we let's take a scenario where we have to configure such a catalog, right? So the catalog can be configured in 3 easy steps. In the step number 1, what we do is we create the glossary. The glossary can be of various types. As shown here, the glossary can be definition of various kinds of categories, the business terms, the classifications, and the data classes. So let's take a look at one of the business terms. So here, if I take a look at the business terms, here I can see that the business terms primarily defines the entity in that domain. So here maybe I will take a example of an encounter, which is a business term. So I can see the business terms is primarily described here as as a definition. It also shows what category it falls in, and also the secondary category, and the business term also defines all the related items. For example, this encounter is related to a patient, which is a data asset. Now, the reason why we were able to get many of these things done very quickly in a short span of time is because the proposed solution comes with a lot of these industry accelerators, and we were able to import the various kinds of business terms and business classes in the healthcare domain. That's how we actually got all these different kinds of business terms very quickly. So now that we understand what is a business term, let's take a look at another glossary item, which is called let's say a data class. The data class primarily describes the format of the data, how the data looks like. So let's take a look at let's say an NRIC number. So we know how an NRIC number looks like, but here we can actually go ahead and define these NRIC number. So here we see that we define the NRIC number is something that starts with S, T, F, G, and it is 7 characters, and it can the last character is A to Z. So this is something that we can define as a data class. Now this is the end of the first step. So we can describe other informations regarding the categories or classifications or reference data, but basically this is the end of first step. In the second step, what we do is we create or define the policies, or we ingest the policies. Policies are basically textual information that describes the various kinds of Policy information, for example, personally identifiable policy. What does it mean? Means that the representation of information that permits the identity of an individual to whom the information applies to be responsible, inferred by either direct or indirect means. So policy is something like this that is actually clearly defined. It might have some kind of an hierarchical structure. So one policy might be represented, or can be described by two sub policies and so on. Now these policies, either we could create and maintain them here in the platform, or if we had already created in a text file, we could actually bring them into the platform. Now, how are these enforced? Policies are enforced by rules. So for example, here, if the personally identifiable information policy cannot be shared, that means that it needs to be masked. So this is actually implemented using the various kinds of masking rules, right? So the policies are implemented in the platform by rules. So let's take a look at the rules. So here is a rule. So the rules are in the form of if then else statements. For example, here it says if the data class contains one of these classes, because we have already defined what is a data class, what is the format of the data class. So we can say that if the data class contains any of these characters, then we want to mask this data, or we want to redact this information on all these things on the various columns. Now once we define these policies, these can applied on the data that we are able to discover. So let's take a look at if we have to create our own rules. I can go ahead and go to the rules editor and go ahead and create my own rule. So let's say create own rule, and there are various kinds of rules. There is a data protection rules, as well as there is a data governance rules. So let's take a data protection rules. So here I can say that if it's a data class that contains an NRIC number, then deny access to it, or mask this data. It's a business term like SG NRIC or something like that. If it comes, and then you can say redact, substitute, or obfuscate, right? So this is how the rules are created. Now once the rules are created, the third step is primarily getting the physical metadata from various kinds of data sources. These could be schemas of databases, or these could be the connection information to a virtualized data access. So let's go here and try and discover the data, which is as a third step. So let me just go to the home and go to data discovery, which is the third step. Okay, so that's the home page. So let's go there and go here. Okay, so here let me go to the data discovery. So if we go to the data discovery, then we see that there is a wizard that can allow me to connect to different kinds of data sources. So let me say there is a new discovery job. I can quick scan this and ask me to choose a connection. So I can use a virtualized connection, or I can use a direct database connection. So here I use a DB2 connection, and then I can also browse to a particular schema. So here in this case, there's a schema is POC, and then it shows up various kinds of schemas. If I don't want to go through this, I can just say IHIS, and then it shows me the schema information. I can select the schema information, and I can move the schema information to a project. The project is a place where I might want to do some kind of manipulation on the schema that is retrieved, and based on some analysis, I might decide to publish some of these extracted data asset before deciding. So let me just add this to this project, and then while we are getting the information about the physical metadata from the data sources, at the same time we now have the ability to to analyze the various columns that gets that comes from the physical metadata, also apply the various kinds of rules that we have defined, and also identify various kinds of business terms that are defined in our glossary. So once we do this, we are ready to discover this data. So this will take few minutes as a batch process. Depending on the size of database, it can takes time. So as we see, it is still analyzing, and it says this is the connection information, this is the job ID. So I can go ahead and look at this the scanned results. So for example, this one I had already run, so it has completed the run. So I can go and look at this. So it shows that it ran for this time. This is it added assets to a data quality project, and then the sample size was 1,000. So let's go and see what the discovered assets are. So it says that it run this on this IHIS schema, and there were two tables that were discovered. So let's take a look at these two tables. So here I see that there were two tables, and I can see that there is a data quality that has been identified and in the encounter, and also some kind of business terms were also applied. And each of these I can see that there is a data quality percentage that gets applied, and then there is a possible business terms that are applied. So the same thing applies to patients. Again, these business terms that get applied on the physical metadata of the columns. So for example, address, we already have an address business term, and it is 100% match, and so on. So fairly, the data quality is fairly is very good. So what we can do is, if we are happy with this, we can add this and publish this information into the data catalog. So I can go and publish this into the data catalog. But here, as we see that this is already published. So once the data is published, we will see that the policies that we have defined. For example, we defined a policy that the NRIC number should be masked. So we can see these policies in action. So for example, now I go back to, once I publish this to a catalog, I can go back to this catalog, the health catalog, and take a look at the policy information. Now this is the user. This user is the administrator who has access to all the policies. The restriction of the policies was only was with respect to only certain set of users. So here, as a user who is a data engineer, probably he has he's the one who is creating these masking policies. So he will be able to see this information. But let's take another user who is the consumer of this catalog. So let me log in as Elise, who is the business user who needs to see this catalog. So I log in and go into the catalog information. So let's take a catalog. Let's take a look at the catalog, and then there is a health catalog. So I can go inside the health catalog. So here I'll go inside the health catalog and take a look at, let's say, a patient record. So if we now take a look at the patient record, and I want to take a look at the asset, so I can see that the asset is all masked. So this is how we can create the governed catalog using the technique of dynamic masking, where the policies are enforced dynamically, and then every data consumer is able to access the data that he needs for various purposes. So this concludes the demonstration of dynamic masking. Let's now see how the static masking will work in the proposed solution.